Thank you, Gabon, and thank you, the Houston Geological Society, for inviting me here. That's the way it goes. The question is, legend or surviving anachronism? I won't regale you with lots of anecdotes, but a short run through the things which formed my life. I grew up under Mussolini's Rome, Italy. I know all about autocrats, dictators, and their various vices. During the war, I was sheltered in Switzerland, but for vacations we went to Rome to visit our parents while the cities of Italy were bombed. In the high school in Switzerland, I had a geography teacher who was a petroleum geologist, and as a final assignment we had to map a small area in the canton of Appenzell-Ausserrhoden in Switzerland, one of the key cantons of Switzerland. As a student in Zurich, I had massive exposure to alpine geology with regular weekly outings into various parts of the Alps. In between, like our friend Arnold, I had to go to the army. I was an artillerist. I was an artillery sound ranger, which was a seismic system, just like any old seismic systems, and we detected the positions of our enemies and of our friends doing sound ranging. PhD project was in the Central Apennines, in an area which was destroyed by the war. Villages were torn apart, people barely survived. It was a war-ravaged area, and many villages were completely destroyed. I saw how people rebuild their future with their own hands, with next to zero support. No FEMA, no government, no nothing, nada. But they did it. As a student, I was hired by Gulf Oil to work on an area in Sicily on a permit acquired by J. Elmer Thomas, or Tommy Thomas. Anybody of you remembers Tommy Thomas? Tommy Thomas was the first president of the APG. And after the war, he decided to take a permit in Sicily. He took also some permits in Austria. And I was hired by Gulf to map that permit. I asked Tommy, why did you take that permit? My English was barely existing, and he gave me a ballpoint pen, which Americans like to do when they saw some lowly Europeans at that time. So, Tommy tells me, young man, it's very easy. All you have to do is drive around the country and see where the regional dip is. Once you see a reversal on the regional dip, that's where you take the acreage. Today we call this hydrocarbon systems. I mapped for 6 hot summers in Sicily, the Ragusa Plateau, and we had something like about 12 prospects, ranked from 1 to 12. And the first one was Ragusa. And why was it number 1? It was the biggest anticline, had an asphalt mine on top of it. The moral of the story is that common sense is worth a lot. Now, you would say at that time the easy oil was already found in those times. It was easy to find that oil. It wasn't easy for me because I spent 6 hot months in the summer of Sicily, getting up at 6 o'clock, getting in the evening at 6 o'clock in the evening, 1 bottle of water and 1 sandwich, all on my foot. So the easy oil was not that easy for the guy who had to do the work. Also, as a student, I was hired to work for hydroelectric power stations in the Alps. So I worked on caverns for turbines, I worked on tunnels, I worked on pylons for cable lifts, and a whole bunch of other things. The conclusion is that I basically am an applied geologist, and my life was dedicated to applied geology. I came to the University to the US, to Columbia University at Lamont, where I spent a lot of time doing micropaleontological work. Reason for that is that my PhD thesis was in a mountain area in Sicily, which I mentioned, in Italy, which I mentioned already, but it was mostly carbonates, and it required thin section micropaleontology, the kind of thing which many, many years later Pete Rose did for his thesis. I could have been your grandfather at that time. Anyway, at Columbia University, we were aimed at mapping climatic changes. Today that's called global change. And what we looked at various pelagic forms, their rotations, and worked out cold, warm, and warm weather curves. So that was in 1953. In 54, I joined Shell in Calgary, and the boss charged me to tell Shell what the Rocky Mountains were all about. And within something like 8 months of my first job, I put my initials on a recommendation for the first dry hole I was responsible for. Meanwhile, back in Sicily, Gulf found a big oil field though, on Ragusa #1. So, the second thing, the second recommendation turned out to be the Waterton field, which is something like about 2 trillion cubic feet of gas and 200 million barrels of oil or whatever. So, way back when, young geologists were immediately given substantial responsibilities. We were given a chance to perform and to meet very substantial challenges. We took responsibility for our dry holes and were allowed to learn from them. Much of my own training was on the job. My colleagues and immediate bosses were mentors. For the rest, I was entirely on my own. Management, mysterious management, was simple and direct. Techniques of diffusing responsibility were yet to be discovered. Formal training barely existed, and I never got any. Contrary to Pete, who was offered, declined the job at Shell because they had this wonderful training program. I didn't get it. In my 10th year, I got a course, a 1-week management course in Banff, after working for a decade for Shell, and it resulted in Shell Canada acquiring huge tracts offshore British Columbia and Nova Scotia. Because I met a lawyer who told me that the same regulations which were used in the Northwest Territories could also be used offshore. So, I like working in areas of applied geology and had few, if any, ambitions to be known as a scientist. Today, young earth scientists spend most of their time facing a computer screen and minimal time in the field. While we like to travel to encounter nature, people with different cultures, and perhaps the chance to stay in touch with the lives of common people and their problems. Today's earth scientists live so much in the virtual world. Their travels are often limited to meetings in hotels, offices, laboratories with other scientists, and that are also glued to the computer. They may well be, this may well be the way of the future, but it may yet lead to a lot of progress. But it does and will attract an entirely different breed of people to the geosciences. So we got to face up that the geosciences are changing. Now let me make a quick summary of a survey which was published in the APG last summer regarding skills that are apparently expected by industry. Let me give you a short summary. Geoscience skills. Highest ranking, sedimentology, stratigraphy, petroleum geology, geophysical interpretation and mapping. You want it. Among the lowest non-ranked skills, structural geology, regional geology and special rock studies. I lost you. Computer skills. Highest workstation interpretation systems, geophysical, geological modeling, and geophysical processing. Lowest, remote sensing, which used to be photogeology, which I did a lot. Non-technical soft skills. Now things get interesting. That's the APG. I guess you can confirm that. You say that. The soft skills, the highest is critical thinking. Surprise, surprise. Ethics and integrity. That's what I was taught by my parents. I didn't need that on my skill thing. And willingness to learn. That's okay. Among the lowest and non-ranked soft skills is leadership. Would you believe that? Risk-taking, Pete. That's your very own society publishes that. And my society does that too. And at the very bottom, international living, soft skill, international living, and travel and non-native language skill. Maître Corbeau sur un arbre perché, t'es ton sommet qu'un fromage. To conclude, according to this survey, industry is now looking for geoscientists that are technicians that can speak and write English well, but do not care to travel elsewhere. Of course, all that today would leave me out as a candidate for hiring. I would not be hired if people would read that. What is so sad about this is that I actually believe the survey is correct and truly representative. And I wonder whether industry has lost somewhat its understanding of the role of the earth sciences. You may want to ponder over that one. Needless to say, the attempts by the author of that survey to realign academic departments will very likely, and rightly so, completely ignored by academia. So, this will bring us eventually, how many minutes have we got? Yeah, okay. So this leads us then to another thing, of course we like to see more traditional field work, but that's not possible. So I think the only relief for geologists now working in industry is to get, for all of them, males and females, get regular maternity leaves to go out in the field and regain their sanity. They could also discover common sense geology, a la Elmer Thomas, and to get a real feeling for the scale of things, all the while meeting with real folks in the countryside that have very real survival problems that are unknown to most city slickers. Okay, I come quickly to a conclusion. So the question is, do geologists, will they survive in the long term? An optimistic view. I'm an optimist. I trust that geology will somehow survive. In the US we have such a variety of academic institutions, private as well as government, plus so many foundations that the science will manage to overcome any perceived present crisis in a selected number of institutions. Also, for many years, industry will survive with the bottom line controlled hiring and firing practices. These eventually may lead to their evolutionary morphing into non-exploratory energy providers that don't need any geologists. Thus, overall, the employment downtime for geologists will continue despite the recent surge in demand. You might want to question my statement on that, but you might actually look at it as a perception some people do have. On the other hand, smaller numbers of geologists, the quality of our science is likely to improve. A few words about oil industry versus academia. In the public, and to a lesser degree in academia, the oil industry is still often in the doghouse. Prime cause for this are first, their inability to control political economic factors that control oil prices, and second, their self-inflicted hiring and firing practices. So then, what are the main obstacles to creative relationships with academia? And of course, the first one is to deny that there is any problem. I suggest it should not be denied. So the main obstacles are industry hiring packets and academic elitisms on the other side. Both of them tend to be worrisome. I happen to think that formal committees are not likely to mean too much because representatives will tell to defend their constituency, thus there are always likely to be some unnecessary posturing. Prefer to have a small informal get-together of interested academic and industry representatives in Houston, the oil capital, would also serve as a good prelude. Avoid highly publicized meetings, grandiose statements of intentions, policies, and grand visions. Avoid, by all means, excessive zeal, righteousness, and lip service followed by little meaningful action. Money is not the answer to everything. Mutual understanding comes first. So a reasonable and collegial dialogue among specialists in academia and industry and government should be welcome. I sense that the younger generation with less baggage may be ready for this. I guess the best that may be done for our sense is to salvage information and the general heritage for better times. Thank you.